So I'm in my office, and I got a Skype call, and I understand that I have my own office. And on the call is Alfredo and somebody named Glenn McKnight. So we're organizing, this is about a year and a half ago, or about a year ago, we're organizing NASIG for the Montreal event, ICANN meeting. Oh, okay, why are you calling me kind of thing? I'm not involved. Oh yeah, we have a session that we think you would really like to do. And I said, oh, what's that? So they tell me that it's called Civil Society, Relevance, Impact, and Purpose. Sounds good, right? So I'm writing it down. So when I wrote it down, I wrote down relevance, impact, and purpose. And it's spelled rest in peace.
Civil society.
Exactly. I was like, okay, is this a message here somewhere? So that's a good way to start. Because I was like, okay, my husband is using Alfredo to tell me to rest in peace. Anyway, like I said, my name is Joan Kerr. I've been a community organizer, advocate, leader for over 30 years. I run an organization called the Foundation for Building Sustainable Communities. And that organization won the Civil Society Award in 2005 from WASIS for community engagement, for content and creativity. We're very happy about that. And just in June this year, we also received consultative status for sustainable development from the UN. So we're very, very happy about that. And this is very important because civil society has become a really important component of society. And so we have three ladies here who are going to talk about different aspects of how they're involved in civil society. But before that, I'd like them to take a minute and introduce themselves, tell us about your organization and your name, your organization, and what relevance is your programs to civil society. Elizabeth, do you want to start?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Joan, and rest in peace. Well, first, my name is Elizabeth Watch, and I'm with the Global Policy Development Team based out of the Washington, D.C. area office. Now, I know our CEO was here, Andrew Sullivan, yesterday, so he spoke a little bit about ISOC and who we are and what we do. So what I would like to say is I'm so glad to be in Montreal because Montreal gave us the Washington Nationals team. I have to say that.
Oh, it's a sore spot with us.
We're very thankful, and you know, where Washington D.C. is going through a very sort of divisive moment. There are quite a number of differences over various issues, as we all know. The sporting event is one way to rally everyone together, which is a good thing, which is the same thing about the internet. It's really about people, bringing people together and connecting with people. So what I will add to what Mark and Andrew may have said about the Internet Society is that we really are the society. We are the people. We are the communities, the organizations that we all represent and work and serve for. And the Internet Society, while it was created in 1992, it was really created at a time when the internet was expanding. And this whole notion of forming a society around the internet really is where our roots are, where the Internet Society is. And you know, we're reminded that just this week with ARPANET's 50th anniversary is that, you know, Vint Cerf's words that the internet of people is more important than the internet of things. So as a civil society organization, you know, the Internet Society was really created to be, first and foremost, the administrative hope for the internet, for the IETF, the Internet Engineering Task Force, and I'm sure you heard a little bit about that yesterday, but also to be an educational and scientific organization. And part of our activities, including a range of others, is really to educate users, governments, scientific and research community about the global infrastructure and also the use of the internet. And that is what civil society's role is to be an educator, to also lend its expertise. And what ISOP does is educate, be an expert on technical, developmental, as well as policy-related issues.
Great.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. For those of you who are here for the morning, my name, I've already introduced myself, but my name is Mehvish Ansari. I'm a digital program officer at Article 19. As I mentioned then, Article 19 is a global human rights organization, but in particular, we focus on the protection and promotion of freedom of expression. So that's a broad set of things, both online and offline. But I'm particularly part of our digital team. Our program, the digital program, has a very specific mandate. It's to look at the internet infrastructure and see how we can develop human rights considerations in the design, development, and eventual deployment of the infrastructure of the internet. In terms of our relevance, I think less in terms of public education, more in terms of advocating for users, advocating for the public interest, advocating for ideas like user-centric security, trying to make sure that people are at the center of policymaking and engineering, when so often it ends up being kind of a tussle between interests of governments and interests of companies, which sometimes align with the interests of users, but not always. Sometimes it's important to also intervene purely on behalf of users. And the way we do that is through the human rights framework, looking at human rights in international law and using them as legal standards that states have obligations to and companies do as well, though they're slightly different. So the work that we do is as a team, when we engage in standard setting spaces, in ICANN, in the IETF, in the IEEE, in the ITU, in 3GPP, we see ourselves as the bridge. What we try to do is connect human rights, legal standards, policymaking, thinking, to technical thinking, engineering, and see where we can start bridging gaps in knowledge. Because what we've seen is that when we work with engineers, when it comes to standard setting, oftentimes it's not that there's political will against being more rights respecting. It's just simply that that language is not there, that there is a gap between technical language and human rights language. So our role is not so much public facing, but really trying to then advocate, translate user-centric values, legal standards that protect people into those technical spaces to see if we can be that bridge.
Great, thank you very much.
Hello everyone, my name is Bruna Santos. I'm Brazilian, so this is kind of the same continent, but a little bit up. And I work for Coding Rights, which is also a Brazilian organization that's working on the field of also digital rights and the digital age, human rights or in the digital age. At Coding Rights, I'm the advocacy strategist, so that means I have been also kind of doing the same things at the regional level, so more talking with the Congress and other policymakers back in Brazil and remembering and helping them remember some important issues for us in the development of the internet and for frameworks dedicated to the internet as well. If I'm allowed to explain a little bit of Coding Rights, we like to say that we're an organization that works in exposing the power imbalances in technology. And this is kind of a phrase that I like very much also for explaining what civil society is, because if you get a meaning, or if you try to reach out a meaning of this very broad definition or very broad name that is civil society.
I will guess it after, go ahead.
Yeah, but then I was just gonna end up saying that we tend to be the stakeholder that is rather closer to the user's problems and to the society's problems in general. So this tends to be the place in which we are actually working with the power imbalances, whether it's working with governments or working with companies, and relying on them to hear our thoughts and sometimes prayers even on how important it is for us to build a better and more equal internet. So this is a little bit of a beginning.
And you're going to hear lots more, and you make a really good point. So let me tell you what, I looked up civil society, So I looked at what the meaning was of the definition. And so every organization almost had a different definition. So for this context, I thought I would, since I'm the moderator, I chose one that I thought was sort of fitting for what we were doing. And it was the broadest one that I could find that incorporate what I thought were all the issues. And here's the one. Civil society is a community of citizens linked by common interests and collective actions. That's pretty broad. Others were a lot more defined. So when you think of civil society, what comes to your mind?
End user.
The end user. Anyone else? Sorry?
Activists.
Activists? No
I'm talking
definitions?
about from the internet perspective.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Civil society, internet users.
The end users? Yeah, we just had that.
Advocates.
Advocates.
Public interest.
Right? Anything else? Human beings?
Not NGOs.
NGOs? Okay. So all of those are civil society. They range from advocates, watchdogs, human rights, political issues, disaster management, you name it. So that's sort of the broad brush of civil society. So when someone says, I belong to civil society, well, that's what they mean. But here's a stat that was really, I found really important. Civil society employs over 54 million people full-time. This is full-time, not part-time, full-time workers, and have a global volunteer force of more than 300